fear and horror are an appropriate response.
Which I know very well, so I've lived in London most of my grown-up life.
There is no other reason to be given why you have not gone to hell.
I think he should apologise.
Oh, sinner!
We have a shattered world around us. We must strive for a sane and just peace.
You hang by a slender thread with the flames of divine wrath flashing about it, ready every moment to singe it. Nothing of your own, nothing that you have ever done, nothing that you can do to induce God to spare you one moment.
Which I know very well, so I've lived in London most of my grown-up life.
And I think he just continues to incite hatred and prejudice.
Consider the fearful danger you are in.
This is a journey into a lunatic asylum.
We have a terrific task ahead of us.
The British knew about the train massacres, but they'd already washed their hands clean of India. Prime Minister Clement Attlee, writing to Lord Mountbatten, the last Viceroy of India in 1947, said, "Keep India united if you can. If not, save something from the wreck. In any case, get Britain out." Despite all this, the 4 million starved to death, the careless partition, the $45 trillion they stole from the Indian people, many don't think that the British did anything wrong in India. Opium consumption ripped through Chinese society like never before. Chinese smugglers quickly realized that if they registered their ships in Hong Kong as British ships, they could keep smuggling opium into China. This triggered the Second Opium War in 1856, when a Chinese ship flying the Union Jack was seized by the authorities. The Chinese crew was arrested and the British flag was torn down.
After the arrival of the white settlers, the Zulus had by that time, the Zulus are a part of the Bantu group, had already come down to Natal. And then you've got the two groups, the one coming from the north, the one coming from the south, and they met. And that's where you get the Zulu War.
It was not even a clash in the sense you are taking it. It was even the British.
It was a clash.
The British in their benevolence, or in fact in their, because they've seen the facts that this thing is not good, they even were exercising a tempering force upon the people.
Boniface, just to make things more complicated for you and Susan, I've heard a third interpretation of this, which might settle it. That was the fact that the Bantu were a migratory people. And that it may be true that at some point when the whites came in, there weren't any Bantus there because they were migrating somewhere else. But look, this is all past history now. I'd like to hear something from Mesfin and Amelia on their interpretation of South African history, but almost rather. Let's bring it up to the present, can't we?
Yes. Yes, we'll bring it up.
And if I had to summarize in one sentence what I think I'm trying to do in politics, I'm trying to tell the people of Britain that they don't have to be big to be great.
Yes. If they wanted to be big now, what good would it do them? I don't mean that.
Exactly so.
Yeah.
And I think that, in the attempt to join the common market, and I'm opposed to that,
yes,
there's a great deal of this instinctive post-imperial wish to be big. If we've lost the empire, the crude idea runs, let's join something else big. What is it? Oh, yes, Europe. And you hear people going about saying Britain would regain a voice in the councils of the world by being part of Europe. Well, that's really nonsense, you know. We should simply be merged in something very different, or at any rate, be all the time refusing to be merged in it, and there's not much future in that.
See, look at my bulldog, look, the separation angle.
Stress to the animal over nothing! It's fucking pathetic, the lot of you!
What the fuck is the matter with you people?
You can meet six who are literally walking mines of information, with sex appeal added. Called, in case you haven't recognized their uniforms, the Promettes. The Promettes, originally formed in 1952 and chosen from trainee models, are on duty at weekends during the summer, making life just one long holiday for visitors.
The irony of the British police Currently. The irony, where are you from? We're allowed to exercise though, we're exercising. No, let's go down there. Why not? Where are you from, my brother? I mean, what kind of, you do not have the right to question. Where are your parents?
Qualifications today include charm, personality and poise, plus intelligence and knowledge of at least one continental language.
Subhanallah, Subhanallah, Subhanallah. Female officers only. Female officers only. Subhanallah, Subhanallah. This is a man. Subhanallah. Please, I am Muslim. Protect me. I am Muslim. Protect me. I am Muslim. Protect me. Protect me. I am Muslim. I am Muslim. I am Muslim. You are scumbags. I will sue your houses. Step back, please. Step back, please. Step back, please. Step back, please. Move back and give us some space. That's how people get hurt, isn't it?
At the Promets mobile headquarters, foreign visitors can have their questions answered in either French, German, Italian or Spanish. And whatever the question, the customer is always right, even when he's wrong.
Don't touch me! I will sue you! Do not get me up! No, I will go with you, I will do. You manhandle me, I won't manhandle you.
বাংলাতেও লেখা থাকবে লন্ডনের এই অঞ্চলে বাঙালিরা রাজনৈতিকভাবে খুবই সক্রিয় হোয়াইট চ্যাপেলের 32% জনসংখ্যাই হলো বাঙালি শ্যাডওয়েলের বাসিন্দা কায়ুম চৌধুরী একটা
Now, it's incredible to think that 40 years ago, a local authority placed an advert in a Uganda newspaper warning Asians not to move to Leicester.
That they had been deceived. They had been told that before Britain, there stretched the prospect of a world of scarcity, a world of higher prices, a world that would no longer have a surplus to sell to Britain, and that they ought to be grateful to take refuge in the safety of Europe, where supplies would be safe and guaranteed, and priced upon the whole at levels advantageous in comparison. Of course, it was the opposite that happened. As the electorate had been warned by those to whom too few would listen, the world market speedily resumed its normal complexion, which for a century and a half had made Britain the crossroads of the oceans.
Welcome to Whitechapel Station. Whitechapel স্টেশনে স্বাগতম। পৃথিবীর ইতিহাসে এই প্রথমবার কোনো দেশের কোনো আন্ডারগ্রাউন্ড টিউব স্টেশনের নাম বাংলাতে নামকরণ করা হলো। ইংরেজি এবং বাংলা এই দুটি ভাষাতেই নামকরণ করা হয়েছে। তো ইংরেজির মতো একটা আন্তর্জাতিক লেভেলের ভাষার পাশাপাশি বাংলাকে স্বীকৃতি দেওয়া এটা আমাদের প্রত্যেক বাঙালির কাছে একটা খুব খুশির আপডেট। এই আপডেটটা দেখে আমার ভীষণ ভালো লাগলো, তাই তোমাদের সাথে এই ভিডিওতে শেয়ার করলাম। লন্ডনের যে হোয়াইট চ্যাপেল আন্ডারগ্রাউন্ড টিউব স্টেশন সেখানে এই বাংলা ভাষাতে নামকরণটা করা হয়েছে। তো ভিডিওটা ভালো লেগে থাকলে অবশ্যই লাইক করবে। দেখা হচ্ছে পরে কোনো ভিডিওতে। বাই।
All our freedoms are being eroded. Freedoms are being eroded, people. You got to stand up. No freedom of speech. No freedom of protest. You've got to stand up to this tyranny. Stand up. God forgive them, for they know not what they do. Tyrants. Pure tyranny.
Asians in Uganda were being forced to leave the country by the dictator Idi Amin, but they defied the warnings from the council, and as Rajiv Popat reports, they arrived penniless and overcame intense hostility to make their mark in Britain.
They split the country into two, Hindu-majority India and Muslim-majority Pakistan.
So black history is a rich and varied part of our history as much as Asian, Jewish, Chinese and Mediterranean history. Also the history of sex, of gender, sexual preference, disability and class. So I'm delighted to see that the contribution of non-white Brits is increasingly recognised across society, and Black History Month is a good opportunity to make those recognitions.
You see it on Black Friday, that's poor people. Imagine them on £1,000 a week. The country would be fucking bouncing. Not one penny going...
But these are the Bantus that are working for you in the factories. How did you get the money? They got the money, they mine the gold, got the gold, and you sold the gold outside. You got the money and you say the money is yours.
Of course
you
it
can't
is.
do that's a contradiction,
Look,
please.
we came along. We bought the machinery. We developed the mines.
From where did you get the machinery from the mines in Johannesburg? Do you own the mines?
No, we got
Who
our
worked the
machinery.
mines?
We got our machinery from Great Britain.
Who
From
worked-
the money that was what was got with the diamonds and
How did you get the diamonds out of the ground?
No native labor there.
How did you
Boniface.
get the diamonds out of the ground?
They weren't dug out of the ground. They were alluvial diamonds. No native labor there, my boy.
What do the natives do? You know what, Suzanne, what's one point you must get right down to the crux of the matter, is that in this country, the Africans are really the backbone of your economy.
Not one penny going offshore or into your savings account. Let's get fucking tattoos, man. People...
And it is one of that cases where you get this question of man's inhumanity to man. And every day you come here to complain about misrepresentation in the American press. In the actual matter of fact, the American press is giving a fairly good view of the whole situation because they have a color problem themselves.
Have you been to South Africa, my boy?
I wouldn't even pay a penny to go there.
Well, then,
That's
how
for
can
sure.
you talk? How can you talk?
Because I have the facts. People come in there, get every people no means of living. How can I go there? I want a house, I want a home, I want position in society.
Well, look, they're getting it. They're getting
let's
exactly what they want.
I'd love to hear from Amelia and Mesfin.
China was forced to legalize the import of opium. With the opium trade finally legal, imports from British-controlled India nearly tripled to hit 6,500 metric tons in 1880. Fed up with the British running drugs into their country, the Chinese authorities decided that if you couldn't beat them, you might as well join them. By around 1915, moral and political opposition to the drug trade had grown. Britain stopped importing opium to China. It simply wasn't profitable anymore. It's hard to quantify the scale of the misery that Britain caused in China, or the mess they left behind. And I know personally because my own great-grandfather was addicted to opium and eventually died of withdrawal in Hong Kong. And it's something my family still talks about all the time. There is a kind of half-assed liberal idea that maybe that's something they should be thankful for.
Yes, very, because after all, the Negroes come from the Gold Coast, and we feel very badly about what the Americans are doing to our Negroes. I know that one of my ancestors probably came here too, and from what I hear in the Gold Coast, the Americans don't give the Negroes a fair chance of activities here. For instance, they don't give the Negroes the same education as they give the white Americans. And also, for instance, a Negro wouldn't be permitted to go to ride on the same bus with a white man. As for me, I don't think that color, which is purely a natural thing, can be such a great bar to human understanding. And I think America is a democratic nation, as it calls itself. But this one thing really doesn't show it off very well as a democratic country.
Amelia, you've been in the New York area for about a month now. Does the picture you had of America that you've just described correspond to what you've seen here in the schools and the communities you've been in?
Well, when I came up here, most of the people in New York told me that segregation is only practiced in the South, but in the North, they have now begun to have integration. Well, I didn't think much about it, but one day after school, I went to a restaurant with a friend of mine, and she's an English girl, and we sat there and waited to be served by a waiter. Well, the waiter just came around, looked at us and passed us and went around serving others who came in after us. Well, I knew at once what he was doing, but my friend didn't know it. So she walked up to the waiter and said, "Well, we've been waiting here so long, won't you serve us?" The waiter just looked at her hard and then looked back at me. And then I told the girl that we better leave the restaurant because I understood it. But the girl was shocked, but I wasn't surprised because that was what I was expecting to find. And
how about
Americans,
you, Mesfin?
Well, in my country...
No, I mean your experience with segregation here. Have you had any?
Well, when I came to America, I was in Dwight High School, and I went for a haircut in the city. I looked up for a barber shop. I went there, and they told me they were busy. I went to a second one. The same thing happened, and to a third one, too.
How about Dwight Morrow? Are there any Negro students there?
Well, there are quite a lot of them. In fact, about 3/4 Negroes in the school. And they are well treated as the other white people, and I'm happy about it. In fact, one of the vice presidents of the school is a Negro himself, Linton Marsh.
How about you, Boniface? Have you met segregation at all here?
I've not met it. I think they must be pretty lucky, because I've been looking forward to get this segregation against me, but I have not got it yet. It's an irony that a South African will get it and I wouldn't get it myself.
Well, Susan really has felt some here. It's interesting that you're the only one who has not. Yes?
What are we after now? I think we'll come back to this question of I think it wasn't the United States racial problems. Well, I feel, of course, that the outlook here has continued to be better.
You do?
I do. But on the other hand, this racial segregation, which of course I do, and I'll always make that point clear, is an outcrop of insecurity in economic conditions, and also somehow low-pointed opinions and all that sort of thing. Provides other people with that same pretext by which they could criticize the United States. Asians and Africans can't understand why a country devoted to the greatest ideals of freedom and democratic government should discriminate among their citizens.
We didn't get to ask Sue whether in South Africa her newspapers play up racial news in America, too.
Oh, yes, they played up a great deal. Well, naturally, we get all these stories about the riots at Clinton, Tennessee, and how they had to escort these people to school and bring out the National Guard and so on and so forth.
Mrs. Waller, if I may interpret, yes. I think there are more riots in the Johannesburg area, in the Negro area, than there are in Tennessee.
Revolution. Revolution. Revolution.
And as we're going to see in the next few weeks, in a general way, this spirit ran through all of the colonies, this sort of sense of really being willing to push for what you wanted. In the old world, naturally enough, things were more tradition-bound. In the new world, just by deciding to go to the colonies, you were already breaking with tradition and behaving differently from the average British subject.
For Asians who moved to Uganda from the Indian subcontinent, life was perfect. But their perfect lifestyle came to an abrupt end when President Idi Amin ordered them to leave the country within 90 days.
In the morning, we had to queue up for breakfast, like we do it in a military. We were given trays in our hands and we had to sort of queue up to get our breakfast.
Leicester became home to more than 10,000 new arrivals. For Rajesh Putney, the cold weather and unfamiliar surroundings were a shock to the system.
People look different to you. It's like in Kampala, as far as I know, I could never remember seeing an English person. Here, all of a sudden, you look everywhere, there were English people, and you think to yourself, who are these people? Probably thinking the same, who's he as well?
I suppose every generation has to recover from what it was taught in its youth.
Just one thing I find rather surprising about the way in which you described the imperial experience is that it is entirely described from our point of view, as if in fact India was a very large Indian Ocean convenience for enlarging the moral vision of the English and for enlarging the commercial life of the English and for giving us a sense of the Pacific possibilities of the world. But at no point do I hear in your rhetoric any feeling of what in fact might have been the experience of the Indians in servicing us in this way.
Revolution. Revolution.
Australia, New Zealand, South America, North America.
From Libya, you come to Syria, to Iraq, to Afghanistan, to Somalia. I mean,
from China all the way to Spain, under the Ottoman Caliphate, the Abbasid, the Umayyad Caliphate.
The sort of Britain that we want is a Britain where the Sharia is implemented.
How is it that we can now deny just safety.
Whether it be France, whether it be other countries, whether it be European countries.
So there is a serious political problem.
If you want to change something, you have to be a part of something. You have to get involved, you have to educate yourself on it, and you have to make a change from inside. It's all good and well having opinions saying no one listens, but if you're not there to be listened to, who's going to listen?
During the war, I rested my trust in the British people